We all know tycoons and we also know simulators, but have you ever wondered what it would be like to combine them? Because that's what I'm gonna be doing today.
Victor! Victor! Victor!
My idea is that the player will be building a tycoon, but instead of purchasing stuff with money, they purchase stuff with items that they got from loot boxes that they purchase with money. So that's basically putting gambling into a game that doesn't need it, but I mean that's what simulators do. So I guess I successfully combined them. Now I just gotta make it into a game. I started by making this island, which is pretty weird, but I have never done something like this, so I guess it's okay for first attempt. And after importing it to Roblox, this is how it was looking. I mean, it's definitely an island, a pretty empty and boring island. But luckily I can easily fix that. So I got back into Blender and modeled these stairs, but the collisions were a bit off. But thankfully I can easily fix it by making some custom hitboxes. There's an option that literally solves the issue and I didn't see it for 30 minutes. But the island was still looking a bit empty, so I made this cool wood thing for ships. But you know what they say, a cool wood thing for ships cannot be a cool wood thing for ships without a ship. So I made a ship and now it can be a cool wood thing for ships. Lastly, I made the island look like a delicious chocolate cake with some grass on top. After that I just made 4 other islands for the tycoons and the map was done. But I also need a way for players to teleport between the lobby and the island. Firstly, I made this map that shows all the islands. And I could take the boring route and just make it a button on screen, but I know a much better solution. Remember the ship parked at the wood thing from like 5 seconds ago? Well, in my opinion, that ship would be perfect for this. So I made this kinda circly thing, you know, the one that simulators usually have, and placed it in front of the ship. At first I was planning on doing some crazy stuff for the hit detection like I did in the past, but I decided to just use the basic hit event since it won't matter that much anyway. And just like that, it works. But why stop there? I mean, it's kinda boring that it just appears randomly. So I added a module script that will hold all the cool UI stuff and made a nice tween, and it was a lot better. But we also need a way to close it, so I added this button in the background that closes it. But we still can't travel with it. So I made this location icon that is literally just a modified circle. Yeah, I found out how to do it properly after 20 minutes. After that I made these info labels with a nice pop-up animation and this button click effect where it gets smaller. And it was finally time to start working on the teleportation. Firstly I made the teleporting system, which was easy enough. I just had to, well, teleport the player. After that I made the owners of the islands show up, which was a bit harder but still not that difficult. But you might notice that I can become the owner of all 4 islands, and owning that many islands comes with a lot of responsibility, which I don't like. So I made this function with a name so long that it could qualify as a built-in Roblox function. But why stop there? I mean, I could make it look way better with a loading screen, so let's make one. I started by taking a picture of the side of 2 islands and recreating them in Photopea. I also did the same thing with the ship, and while we're at it I also updated the map. After that I made the ship move with a tween, and this is how it was looking. Now let's get into the fun stuff, aka the gambling. I started by making a farmhouse, and you might be asking yourself, why is this random dude making a farmhouse out of nowhere? But it will make sense, I promise. After that I made this basket and these awesome looking fruits. Except they don't look that awesome. Actually they look kinda bad. Thankfully I can fix it with shade smooth and they look okay now. I also made this seed package and filled the basket with the fruits and imported it to Roblox. And you might notice that the strawberry and the seed package look off, and that's because they use a different texture than all the other fruits, which is not a problem in Blender, but in Roblox you can only have one texture for an object. Which meant that I had to combine all the textures into one and remap the whole thing, which was really annoying, but anyways, here it is in game. I also added a hover effect using the Scene Tools plugin and these circles, and I think you see where I'm going with this. But then for some reason I decided to do controller and mobile support for the teleport menu, so I guess now we have that. Anyways, after that I started working on the loot box buying frame. Firstly, I added some text and whatnot and merged the basket and the fruits into one object, which meant that I had to remap part of it again, but it wasn't that bad. But as you can see, the fruits look a bit worse than before, and that's because while the fruits have shade smooth on, the basket doesn't, and one object cannot have shade smooth turned on and off at the same time. After that, I put the model into a viewport frame and the first square was done. I put the drops in the second square, and for now I leave the third square empty because it's only gonna be important for the next video. After that, I scripted an updating function and made some spinny stuff, and it was done. Now I think you've already guessed that this is supposed to be a loot box, but you can usually buy loot boxes, and as you can see, you can't really do that with this one. So I also made a buying button, and yeah, nothing happens when you click it because there's no cool opening animation yet. But before that, I made this drop randomizer using a module called TrueRandom. Now it's time for the animation. Originally, I wanted to add a highlight to the box, and to do that I would have had to make it part of the 3D world, but you see, there's a problem with that. And the only way of fixing it is making it render on top of everything else, which is, to my knowledge, only possible by using viewport frames, which sadly don't support highlights, but at least it's not clipping into stuff anymore. After that, I added a jump animation that plays when the player clicks on the screen. But we also need a way to finish the unboxing, so I added a counter that goes up every time the button is clicked, and a finishing animation that plays when the counter reaches 3. And here's the final result. But I also need a place to store the things that I get. I started by making the icon for the inventory and this frame, which consisted of viewport frames, and this button, which is pretty useless right now, but in future videos will be important. After that, I made a script that creates the inventory for the player and some other less interesting scripts, and the inventory was done. Now let's visit the island. Wow, they look a bit empty, so let's make the player be able to build stuff. I started by making the thing that the player will build, which is a cherry tree with a basket in front of it. After that, I made the frame for the build menu and made it appear when the player steps on a blue button. After that, I started making the display for the required items, but then I crashed. But thankfully I didn't lose any progress because I had Team Create turned on. But anyways, here's how it was looking. Now I just need to actually build it, and thankfully it was as simple as reparenting the build from the replicated storage to the workspace. But of course I didn't stop there because it looked kinda weird that it just popped into existence, so I made this smoke particle and twinned the size and position of the build, and it was done. Easy enough, right? Wait, what happened to the particle? Turns out all I needed was a small weight before emitting the particles. After that, I made a label that shows how many coins the player has. But it's kinda weird that I can still open boxes even though I have no coins. So I fixed that, and now I cannot open boxes unless I have enough coins. But it still feels a bit weird that nothing happens even though I'm pressing the button, so I added this error message that can be customized to say anything. But that begs the question, how do I earn money? Now, I want you to take a look at this tree and tell me if it resembles something, because to me it resembles a Tycoon dropper. So I made it a dropper by spawning a drop every second. But I couldn't just stop there, of course, because let's be honest, it looks a bit boring. So I added a text that shows how much money you got from each drop. And that wraps up this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And of course I would have liked to do a lot more things in this video, but you know, rent was